Okay, this video is going to be about what information do I need to replace this condenser fan motor for my air conditioning system outside unit. So this is your condensing unit, and you notice that this motor here, you have to replace it, right? So what information do I need to replace this motor? Okay, you're only going to need 3 pieces of information to replace this motor. There's actually 3 critical parts of information that you're going to need to replace it. You're going to need to know what the RPMs of that motor is, okay, the horsepower, and the actual voltage, okay. Now the capacitor size isn't going to matter. So if the capacitor was bigger or smaller on the new motor or the replacement motor that you're putting in, it doesn't matter the capacitor size. What really matters, like I said, are 3 things: your horsepower, your RPMs, and your voltage, okay. Those are the 3 main things that you're going to need. Now if you notice here on this motor right here, this motor here is an 825 RPM, horsepower 1/4. Now if you notice on these factory motors, they're going to be the horsepowers are going to be fractional 1/4, but on my truck I carry universal motors. Okay, I could replace any AC motor with just 2 motors in my truck. I always carry a 1/3 to a 1/5 horsepower condenser fan motor, and this one actually is at 825 RPMs, and the other motor I carry actually is right here. This one is going to be a 1/3 to 1/6 1075 RPM condenser fan motor. These are going to be your 2 main fan motors in your truck, okay. The other fan motor that I carry for residential is this one. It's a straight 3rd 825 RPM. You're not going to use this one too often. The only time you're going to use this motor is when you got really big train units like this one. So here's a train unit. The fan blades on the trains are going to be, especially on the older ones, they're going to be much thicker, heavier gauge metal on the actual fan blade. When you're going to a unit and the fan blade is actually very kind of thick or heavy, you're going to want to use the actual 1/3, the straight 1/3. A straight 1/3 horsepower is actually going to be stronger than these universal fan motors. So I'll make an example. On this unit right here, this condenser fan motor is a 1/4 horsepower, 825 RPM. So you're going to want to use this motor right here, because this motor is from 1/3 to 1/5, right? So this motor is actually just perfect for this one right over here. This one will work just fine, right? Now sometimes you got the 1075 RPMs. So if you go to a motor and it's 1075, you want to replace it with the 1075. It's okay sometimes, depending on the size of the fan blade, to go up or down on the actual horsepower. The only real time that you're going to actually go up on the actual fan blade is, let's say the fan blade broke and then you go to the supply house and the supply house gives you an actual heavier blade. It's okay to go up just maybe, let's say the unit that you were working on was a 5th horsepower, and now the manufacturer gave you a comparable blade, but that blade is actually a little bit heavier. Okay, you could actually go to a 1/4 horsepower if the blade is, like, let's say a little bit heavier. Most of these replacement blades, when you go to the supply house, they are going to be a little bit heavier, so you may have to go a little bit bigger on the horsepower to compensate for that weight on the fan blade, okay. Now I have noticed that when I use universal horsepowers on these trains, a lot of these universals will go out within 1 to 3 years, okay. So when you work on these train units, you want to pretty much use the actual if it's let's say the train you're working on is a 1/3 or a 1/4, you should actually put a 1/3 or a 1/4 on these train units. So on the train units, if you want that motor to last for a long time, You should use the actual straight, they call it like a straight horsepower. So let's say this one is going to be a 1/4 horsepower. You want to get a motor that says horsepower 1/4. Okay, I'm going to show you some other units in the back over here. Now if you notice, the weight of the fan blade does make a big difference in replace when you want to actually replace a motor. If you notice this one right here, this one is actually a 1/4 horsepower, 850 RPM. Now if you notice, this one here says 850 RPM, so you're going to want to get the closest one to replace it. You're going to usually see sometimes on the manufacturers, you're going to see 850 and 1100 RPMs. If you actually see an 850 RPM, you can replace it with an 825 RPM. If you see 1100 RPMs, you can replace it with 1075 RPMs. Now, what do I mean when I say the fan blade is heavy or light? I'm going to show you what I mean by that. This is actually a pretty paper thin fan blade here. You could actually bend it, right? These are your light fan blades. You can actually take it and bend it, and when you knock it, you hear like an echo. This is a very light fan blade. You can these fan blades, you can use a universal with no problem, okay, with these fan blades. Now like I said, the only problem are these train units. The train units, their fan blades are usually a lot thicker and heavier, so I recommend getting the actual the straight horsepower fan motors on these ones, because what's going to happen is if you put the universals on the train units, after a while these motors will overheat, and a lot of times on the bigger residential units like the 5-ton units, they will also overheat. Now this is more of an old style carrier unit as well. These old style carrier units, they actually also have a pretty big blade in them. So on these ones, you may want to consider putting a straight, let's say this one right over here. On this one, this is a 1/4 horsepower, 825 RPM. You could put either or. My recommendations for this motor, actually, you should put a straight 1/4 825 RPM on this one. But if you had no choice, you could put a universal on these motors, actually on these ones as well. So you could put either or on these ones. Okay, now let's see here. Now on this unit right here, this unit here, if we look at it, this has a universal on it already. It's a 1/3 to 1/8 825 RPM already in there. So if this motor went out, you could put another universal in here, no problem. Okay, well, I hope this video helps you replace your condenser fan motor if it ever goes out. Okay, have a great day.